No one cares what you meant to do. They care about what happened. You can have the best intentions in the world. To help, to fix, to do the right thing. But if the result is failure, you are judged by the failure. Not your effort, not your motive, not your explanation. Because in the world of power, intentions are invisible. Outcomes are not. We like to believe that intentions matter. That if we mean well, if we try our best, if we act with good purpose, people will understand. They'll see the effort. They'll recognize the intent. But that belief doesn't survive in positions of responsibility. Because leadership is not judged internally. It's judged externally. People don't experience your thoughts. They don't see your reasoning. They don't feel your intentions. They experience results. And from those results, they form conclusions about you. This is one of the hardest realities to accept. Because it removes comfort. It removes excuses. It removes the idea that trying is enough. This is what thinkers like Niccolò Machiavelli understood in The Prince. Leaders are judged by outcomes, because outcomes are the only thing people can see. In this episode, we break down why intentions don't protect you, don't define you, and don't sustain power. Only results do. You know your intentions. Other people don't. That's the gap. Inside your mind, everything is clear. You know why you made a decision. You know what you were trying to achieve. You know the reasoning behind your actions. But none of that is visible to others. All they see is what actually happens. This is the first mistake people make. They assume others will judge them based on intent. But intent is internal, private, unseen, and anything unseen has no weight in perception. You may act with care, but if the result creates damage, people don't feel your care. They feel the damage. You may try to help, but if the outcome creates problems, people don't remember your effort. They remember the problem. This is the disconnect between intention and impact. And impact always wins, because impact is experienced. This is why explanations often fail. You try to explain, "I didn't mean for this to happen. That wasn't my intention. I was trying to help." But those explanations come after the result. And by that point, judgment has already formed. Because people don't wait for your explanation. They react to what they experience. This is what Niccolò Machiavelli recognized in The Prince. A leader cannot rely on what is unseen. They must operate through what is visible. And what is visible is outcome. This is why intention alone is powerless. Not because it doesn't exist, but because it cannot be measured. It cannot be verified. It cannot be experienced by others, which means it cannot shape perception. And in leadership, perception is everything. So the question shifts. Not what did you mean to do, but what actually happened. Because that answer is what defines you. If intentions are invisible, then what do people use to judge you? Outcomes, clear, visible, undeniable outcomes. Because outcomes don't require explanation. They don't need interpretation. They are experienced directly. Success is seen. Failure is felt. And from that, judgment is formed. This is how quickly it happens. A decision leads to a result. That result creates an experience. And that experience becomes your identity in that moment. Effective, incompetent, reliable, careless, not based on what you meant, but based on what happened. This is why outcomes carry so much weight. They simplify everything. People don't have to think deeply. They don't have to analyze your intentions. They look at the result and decide. This is what makes outcomes powerful. They remove ambiguity. A strong result creates confidence. A weak result creates doubt. And once that doubt appears, it spreads. Because people don't isolate events. They connect them. One failure becomes a pattern. One mistake becomes a signal. And that signal begins to define you. This is why consistency in outcomes matters more than occasional success. You can succeed once and still be questioned. But consistent results create belief. And belief stabilizes your position. This is what Niccolò Machiavelli emphasized in The Prince. Leaders are not judged by isolated actions. They are judged by what those actions produce over time. Because outcomes are the only evidence people trust. Not explanations, not intentions, not promises. Evidence, and evidence is built through results. This is why two people can make the same decision and be judged differently. If one produces a strong outcome, they are seen as strategic. If the other produces a weak outcome, they are seen as reckless. The action may be identical. The judgment is not, because outcomes redefine the meaning of the action. This is the shift most people resist. They want fairness. They want intention to matter. They want effort to be recognized. But in positions of responsibility, results take priority. Because results affect others. And people respond to what affects them, not what you meant to do. This is the rule. Outcomes create judgment. And once that judgment is formed, it becomes difficult to reverse. Good intentions do not protect you from bad outcomes. And in positions of power, bad outcomes carry consequences. This is where most people become confused. They believe that if their intentions are good, they should be judged differently, more fairly, more leniently, more understandingly. But that's not how it works. Because the people affected by your decisions don't experience your intentions. They experience the result. If the result creates loss, they feel the loss. If the result creates instability, they feel the instability. If the result creates damage, they carry the damage. And in that moment, your intention becomes irrelevant. This is why good intentions can still destroy trust. Because trust is not built on what you mean to do. It is built on what you consistently produce. You can mean well repeatedly, but if the outcomes keep failing, confidence begins to drop, doubt begins to grow, and eventually, people stop trusting your decisions altogether. This is one of the harshest realities of leadership, because it removes emotional protection. You don't get credit for trying. You get judged for delivering. This is what Niccolò Machiavelli understood in The Prince. A leader cannot rely on being well-intentioned, because well-intentioned failure still weakens authority. And weakened authority creates instability. This is why outcomes matter more than motives. Because outcomes affect reality. And reality affects people. There's also a deeper psychological layer. When someone experiences a negative outcome, they look for someone to hold responsible. And they don't ask, what was the intention? They ask, who caused this? Responsibility is assigned based on impact, not intent. This is why explanations often fail to repair trust. I didn't mean for this to happen. I was trying to help. That wasn't my intention. These statements may be true, but they don't undo the result. And because they don't undo the result, they don't restore confidence. This is where many leaders lose credibility. Not because they are malicious, but because they rely too heavily on intention as a defense, instead of focusing on outcomes as a responsibility. This is the shift from meaning well to delivering well. Because in the end, people don't measure your intentions. They measure your impact. And impact is what they remember. Intentions do something dangerous. They make you feel justified, even when the outcome fails. This is the illusion of moral comfort. You tell yourself, I meant well. I was trying to help. My intentions were good. And that belief softens the impact of failure. It protects your self-image. It allows you to separate who you are from what actually happened. But in doing so, it creates a blind spot. Because instead of analyzing the outcome, you defend the intention. Instead of asking what went wrong, you ask, why am I being judged unfairly? And this is where growth stops. Because intention becomes a shield, a way to avoid full responsibility. This is what makes moral comfort dangerous. Not because intentions are bad, but because they can prevent you from confronting reality. This is something Niccolò Machiavelli understood in The Prince. Leaders cannot afford to hide behind what they meant to do. They must face what actually happened. Because outcomes affect systems, people, stability, and when something goes wrong, the cost is real, not theoretical. This is why intention-based thinking fails in power. It focuses inward, on motive, on self-perception, but leadership requires outward focus, on impact, on consequence, on results, and the moment you prioritize how you feel about your intentions over what your actions produced, you lose clarity. You begin to justify instead of correct, explain instead of improve, defend instead of adapt. This is the trap, because it feels right, it feels fair, it feels reasonable, but it disconnects you from reality. And power cannot operate in disconnection. It must operate in accuracy. This is the shift from asking, did I mean well, to asking, what did this actually produce? Because only one of those questions leads to better outcomes. The other leads to repeated mistakes. If intentions don't define you, then what should guide your decisions? Outcomes. This is the shift from reacting emotionally to thinking strategically. Because a strategist does not ask, what do I feel is right? They ask, what will this produce? This is the difference. One focuses on intention. The other focuses on consequence. And consequence is what shapes reality. This is where most people struggle. They make decisions based on what feels fair, what feels good, what aligns with their internal values. But they stop there. They don't follow the chain forward. They don't ask, what happens next? What are the second-order effects? What does this lead to over time? This is why well-intentioned decisions often fail. Because they are incomplete. They start with motive, but don't account for outcome. This is what separates strategy from reaction. A strategist sees beyond the moment. They think in sequences. Cause, effect, consequence, not just action, but reaction, not just intention, but impact. This is what thinkers like Niccolò Machiavelli emphasized in The Prince. Leaders must evaluate decisions based on what they will create, not what they are meant to express. Because leadership is not expression. It is execution. And execution is measured by results. This requires a different mindset. Before acting, a strategist asks, what is the likely outcome? What could go wrong? How will this be perceived? What are the long-term effects? This level of thinking reduces surprises, reduces unintended consequences, and increases control. Because you are no longer reacting to outcomes, you are anticipating them. This is how power is stabilized, not through perfect intentions, but through calculated decisions. But there's another layer. Strategy is not about removing values. It's about aligning values with outcomes. Because values without results create weakness. But values with results create influence. This is the balance. You don't abandon intention, you refine it. You test it against reality. You ensure that what you intend actually produces what you expect. Because in the end, Thinking like a strategist means one thing. You take responsibility not just for your actions, but for their consequences. At some point, explanations stop working. Excuses lose their effect, and intentions no longer protect you. Because in positions of power, there is a simple expectation. Deliver results, not reasons, not justifications, not explanations after the fact. Results, this is where everything comes together. Because once you understand that outcomes define perception, your focus shifts completely. You stop asking, "How do I explain this?" and start asking, "How do I control this?" This is the difference between reactive thinking and controlled execution. Reactive thinking responds to failure. Controlled execution prevents it. This is what separates those who maintain power from those who lose it. Because power is not lost in one moment. It erodes through repeated weak outcomes, missed expectations, uncontrolled consequences, and each time you rely on intention as a defense. Instead of outcome as a responsibility, you weaken your position. This is why excuses are dangerous. Not because they are always wrong, but because they delay correction. They shift focus away from what matters. Instead of fixing the result, you defend the reasoning. Instead of improving the system, you protect your image. And over time, that gap becomes visible. People begin to notice the pattern. Results don't match expectations. And when that pattern forms, confidence drops. Trust weakens. Authority becomes unstable. This is what Niccolò Machiavelli warned against in The Prince. A leader cannot rely on excuses to maintain power. Because excuses do not stabilize systems. Only results do. This is the final shift. From defending intention to controlling outcome. Because once you take responsibility for results, you gain control. You begin to anticipate problems before they happen. Adjust decisions before they fail. Correct patterns before they repeat. This is how authority is maintained. Not through perfection, but through consistent control of outcomes. And when results become predictable, confidence follows. Trust stabilizes. Power holds. Intentions may define how you see yourself, but outcomes define how others see you. This is the reality behind power. A reality understood by thinkers like Niccolò Machiavelli in The Prince. Not that intentions don't exist, but that they don't determine judgment. Because people don't experience your motives. They experience your results. And those results shape your reputation, your authority, and your influence. In the next episode, we go even deeper. Why loyalty is temporary, and why trust is always conditional. Because in the world of power, nothing is as stable as it seems. If you want to understand power beyond surface-level advice, subscribe to The Lonely Pen. Because this series is not about what feels right. It's about what works.